For my 9-year-old daughter's birthday, my mother-in-law gave her an empty box wrapped in pink. "You were a bad girl this year," she said. My sister-in-law laughed in agreement. Then my husband's grandmother stood up and said this. The entire room was left speechless. Lucy's 9th birthday party was in our Columbus living room on a Saturday afternoon, with paper streamers drooping from the ceiling fan and a lopsided stack of gifts by the couch. Daniel had just lit the candles, and Lucy was bouncing on her knees like she might lift off the rug if she waited one more second. Pamela arrived last, perfume first, with Paul a step behind her, holding an oversized box wrapped in glossy pink paper like it was a trophy. Pamela didn't put it on the pile. She set it on her lap and kept a hand on it while she smiled at Lucy. "Save room," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This one's important." Ashley snorted from the armchair. Her boys, Mason and Carter, were already on their 3rd slice of pizza, sticky fingers on my throw pillows, and nobody said a word about it. Lucy looked from the candles to the pink box, trying to be polite and excited at the same time. I caught Daniel's eye, and he gave me that familiar little shrug, his "please don't start a thing" look. I forced my shoulders down and handed Lucy the plastic knife for the cake. Lucy blew out the candles to a chorus of cheers, and we passed out cake on paper plates. When the plates were mostly empty, Pamela's fingers tightened on the ribbon like she was waiting for her turn. Pamela brought her own spotlight. After the first round of presents, stickers from my neighbor, a sketchbook from my aunt, Pamela leaned forward like a referee calling time. "Now," she said, sliding the pink box across the coffee table until it bumped Lucy's knees. "Open mine next. I want to see her face." Lucy's grin widened because Lucy still believed adults meant well by default. She lifted the box carefully, turning it so she wouldn't tear the paper too fast, and Pamela clicked her tongue. No, don't baby it. Rip it. Let's not waste time." Daniel started to say, "Mom," but Pamela's smile cut him off. "It's just wrapping, Daniel. Let her enjoy it." Ashley held up her phone, already recording. "This is gonna be good," she said, and Mason yelled, "Open it!" like it was a game show. I saw Lucy clock the little red recording dot and swallow. Pamela tapped one polished nail on the lid, slow and impatient, like she was counting down. Lucy peeled the tape, and the lid gave a soft pop. For half a second, her eyes went bright, like she'd seen something shiny inside. Then she froze, fingers still on the edge, and her smile stayed stuck in place while her brows pinched together. She looked at me first, not Pamela, like she was checking for the rules. The air got thin. Lucy lifted the lid all the way and tilted the box toward the light from the window, like maybe the gift was hiding in a corner. It was plain cardboard inside. No tissue paper, no note, not even that crinkly plastic that comes with cheap jewelry. "Is there a card?" she asked, still gentle, still assuming she'd missed something. Pamela didn't answer. She just watched, chin slightly raised. Lucy reached in and ran her fingertips along the bottom, then slid a hand under the cardboard insert as if there might be a secret compartment. Nothing. She gave the box a careful shake, like she might hear a rattle or a slip of paper. Still nothing. Ashley laughed once, sharp and quick, like she'd heard a private joke. Daniel leaned in, then pulled back like he'd touched a hot stove. Mason and Carter stopped chewing long enough to stare, their eyes bouncing between Lucy and Pamela. I tried to rescue it the way you do when a kid opens the wrong gift bag at a party. "Maybe it's a scavenger hunt," I said, forcing a light tone. "Maybe there's a clue." Lucy brightened at the idea and looked into the lid again, hopeful. Pamela's mouth stayed flat. It wasn't a mistake. Pamela finally spoke, slow and clear, like she was teaching a lesson to the whole room. "It's empty," she said, nodding toward Lucy's lap. "Because you were a bad girl this year." For a beat, Lucy didn't understand the sentence. Her eyes widened, then flicked to Daniel, then back to Pamela, waiting for the punchline that never came. Her cheeks went red in a wave, and her mouth opened and closed once, like she couldn't find the right polite response. Ashley leaned back and cackled. "Told you," she said to her mom, like Lucy was a failed experiment. "Maybe she'll learn." From across the room, my neighbor Jenna stared at Pamela and mouthed, "Seriously?" like she couldn't say it out loud. The room did that awful, quiet recalculation, everyone suddenly aware of where their hands were, where to look. Jenna set her paper plate down too hard. Someone's fork clinked against a glass. Daniel stood up so fast his chair scraped. "Mom, what are you doing?" he asked, but his voice sounded small, like he was 8 again. Lucy kept holding the empty box like it was something she was supposed to fix. Her fingers went white around the edges. Her shoulders collapsed inward, and she stared at the cardboard as if it had betrayed her. Pamela didn't blink, and Lucy's face crumpled. I slid off the couch and knelt beside Lucy, putting my hand over hers on the box like I could make it lighter. "Hey," I said, low. "You didn't do anything wrong." Pamela's eyes snapped to me. "Sarah, don't undermine me," she said, like she was correcting my parenting in my own house. "She's been disrespectful. She talked back when I asked her to help last time." "She said no to being your maid," I replied, keeping my voice even, because Lucy was watching every muscle in my face. Ashley lifted her eyebrows. "Wow," she said. "Imagine telling your grandmother no. Must be nice." She glanced at Lucy and added, "Maybe this will fix the attitude." Daniel took a step forward, then stopped, hands hovering like he didn't know where to put them. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Can we not do this today?" he pleaded. Pamela leaned toward Lucy, not me. "You want real presents?" she asked. "Then you apologize. You say you'll be a good girl from now on." Lucy's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She stared at the carpet, swallowing hard, like tears were something else she could get in trouble for. Her toes curled inside her socks. From the dining nook just off the living room, I heard Vivian's cane tap once against the floor. Someone was standing up. Vivian pushed her chair back with a careful scrape, the kind of slow movement that still carries authority when you've lived long enough to earn it. She was Daniel's grandmother, Paul's mother, small, silver-haired, cardigan buttoned wrong, but when she stood, the chatter in my living room died like someone flipped a switch. Pamela's posture changed immediately. She sat up straighter, eyes narrowing, like she was about to win an argument she'd had 100 times before. Ashley's phone dipped, recording forgotten, and even Mason and Carter went quiet, pizza halfway to their mouths. Paul sat up too, suddenly attentive. Vivian didn't look at the empty box first. She looked at Lucy, really looked, at the way my daughter was trying to disappear into herself on her own birthday. Then Vivian's gaze moved to Pamela, and her voice came out calm, not loud. "Enough," she said. Daniel exhaled like he'd been holding air for years. I felt it too, that shift in the room, people leaning forward, waiting, because they could sense something final was about to be said. Vivian set both hands on the back of her chair, steady as a judge. Pamela opened her mouth, ready to steamroll. Vivian didn't let her, and that's when I knew we were done. Two weeks earlier, on a Tuesday night, Daniel sat at our kitchen island with his laptop open to our bank app, a yellow legal pad full of numbers beside his elbow. Lucy was doing math homework, humming, and I was rinsing dishes when I saw the line item on his screen. Transfer, $300. He'd even written Mom/Dad next to it, like it was a bill we couldn't question. "You're sending it again?" I asked, keeping it quiet. Daniel didn't look up. "It's just what I do," he said, like he was describing taking out the trash. Dad's short this month. Mom said the car insurance went up. Daniel, they go on cruises, I said, and they treat our kid like a chore. He rubbed his forehead. I know, but if I stop, it becomes a whole thing. Mom cries, Dad gets sick. Ashley texts me 20 times. As if summoned, his phone buzzed right then. Pamela's name lit up the screen, followed by a second buzz. Ashley. Daniel's shoulders rose and stayed there. He answered on speaker before I could stop him. Hey, Mom. Pamela's voice was sweet in that sharp way. You sent it yet? Daniel glanced at Lucy, lowered the volume, and said, I'm doing it now. He hit confirm, like it was a reflex. Peace, purchased on auto pay. My own parents live outside Portland, and the distance shows up in small ways. Birthday cards arriving late, FaceTime calls that freeze mid-sentence, Lucy growing inches between visits. So when we moved to Columbus and Daniel's family was 15 minutes away, I told myself it was a gift. Most Sundays, I packed a container of brownies, strapped Lucy into her booster, and drove over with that stubborn optimism moms get when we want something to work. Remember, I'd say, smiling into the rearview mirror. We're guests. Say please. Say thank you. Lucy always did. She'd carry in the brownies with both hands like a peace offering and say, Hi, Grandma Pamela, even when Pamela barely glanced up from her phone. Paul would clap Mason and Carter on the head and call them my little men, then look at Lucy and say, You getting tall, like he was commenting on a mailbox. Ashley would sprawl on the couch, feet on the coffee table, and tell Lucy, Go play with the boys, even though the boys never let her. I kept showing up anyway because I wanted Lucy to have grandparents close enough to cheer at school plays and bring soup when she was sick. I thought proximity could turn into warmth. Instead, it turned into rules, and I let it, for too long. At Pamela and Paul's place, the boys were allowed to be kids, and Lucy was expected to be an employee. Mason could fling ketchup across the patio, and Paul would laugh. Carter could whine for another soda, and Pamela would pop up like a waitress. Lucy spilled one drop, and Pamela would hand her a paper towel with a look. One afternoon, Ashley's boys tore open a bag of chips in the living room, crumbs grinding into the carpet, and Pamela just said, Boys, like it was cute. Then she turned to Lucy and pointed at the sink. Since you're the oldest, she said, why don't you rinse those plates? Good girls help. Lucy's eyes flicked to me, and I gave her the tiniest nod, the one that said, Just do it. We'll leave soon. She carried plates to the kitchen while Mason and Carter kept playing video games, feet up, controllers clicking like a soundtrack to her quiet work. Pamela followed Lucy in and watched her wash, not helping, just supervising. That's better, she said. See? You're capable when you try. Lucy scrubbed harder than she needed to, like effort could buy approval. Then, without looking up, she asked, Do good girls get thanked? Pamela didn't answer. Lucy learned the answer anyway. The visit that started the war was in early spring, when Pamela called and said, We could use help getting ready for company. That should have been my cue to say no, but Lucy was excited because Vivian was coming over too, and Lucy adored her. We walked in, and Pamela pointed at a bucket and a stack of rags like she'd been waiting. Lucy, honey, she said, you can wipe baseboards. You're older now, and you're a girl, so you know how. Lucy blinked. Do Mason and Carter have chores? Ashley laughed from the couch. They're boys. They'll just make a bigger mess. Pamela clapped once. Let's not be difficult. Good girls help without arguing. Lucy took the rag, cheeks tight, and walked toward the hallway. She was 9, and the rag looked huge in her small hand. I followed her and gently took it back. No, I said. Lucy's here for family, not housekeeping. Pamela's face hardened. So that's why she's mouthy, she said, loud enough for Lucy to hear. Because you reward it. Daniel tried to smooth it over, murmuring, "Let's all calm down," while Lucy stood there empty-handed, staring at the bucket like she'd failed an exam. That day, Pamela decided Lucy owed her obedience, and I decided my daughter didn't. After the baseboard fight, Vivian asked if Lucy would help her out to the back porch, away from Pamela's ears. Lucy followed her, shoulders still stiff, and I watched through the window while Vivian handed Lucy a tiny watering can and pointed to a row of potted herbs. "You don't have to earn being loved," Vivian told her, matter of fact, like she was stating the weather. "You just have to be you." She pressed a small packet of sunflower seeds into Lucy's palm like it was something sacred. Lucy watered the basil and whispered, "But Grandma Pamela says good girls help." Vivian's mouth tightened. "Then Grandma Pamela needs to remember what good means." When Lucy ran off to chase Mason and Carter, Vivian stayed with me a minute, leaning on her cane. "Pamela has always used gifts like strings," she said softly. "Ashley learned it early." I tried to keep my face neutral, but Vivian touched my wrist. "I've been watching how they test that child," she said. "I don't like what I see." "What do I do?" I asked. Vivian's eyes stayed steady. "You keep doing what you did today, and if they try to punish Lucy for it." She paused, then added, "Let them." Her tone wasn't a warning. It was a promise. Back in my living room, Lucy still had the empty pink box on her lap, fingers curled around the edges like she might crush it if she let go. I could see the effort it took for her not to cry in front of everyone, the way she stared at the cardboard to keep her face still. Pamela looked pleased, like she'd landed a punch and wanted credit for it. Ashley shifted in her chair, phone angled toward Lucy again, waiting for tears she could replay later. Paul sat quiet, eyes on the floor, the kind of silence that pretends it's neutral. Daniel stood behind the coffee table, hands open, as if he was trying to hold the room together with his palms. His eyes darted between his mother and his grandmother, and for once he looked like he didn't know the script. Vivian remained standing. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't scold Lucy. She didn't ask for explanation. She simply looked at Pamela and said, "Repeat what you just told that child." Pamela's lips parted in surprise. "Vivian, don't start," she said, immediately defensive. Vivian took one slow step closer. "Say it again," she repeated. The room leaned toward her like gravity, and Pamela realized she had an audience. Pamela lifted her chin. "I said she's been bad," she replied, louder now. "She needs to learn respect." Vivian didn't flinch. "That wasn't discipline," she said. "That was humiliation, dressed up like a sermon." Ashley scoffed. "Oh my God, here we go." Vivian turned her head just enough to include Ashley without giving her the satisfaction of full attention. "Adults who mock a child in public are not teaching manners," she said. "They're teaching fear." Pamela's cheeks darkened. "It's my right as her grandmother to correct her. My house. My rules." "This isn't your house," I said before I could stop myself, and Pamela's eyes flashed at me. "No," Vivian said, and her voice stayed level. "Your right is to love her. Correction is a parent's job, and even parents don't get to do it with cruelty." Daniel finally found his voice. "Mom, you embarrassed Lucy," he said, still stunned. "On her birthday." Pamela snapped. "Because she embarrassed me first. She refused to help me. She thinks she's above family." Vivian's gaze moved to Lucy again. "Sweetheart," she said, "you did nothing wrong by saying no." Then she looked back at Pamela. "And you did everything wrong by punishing her for it." Pamela opened her mouth to argue, but no sound came out. For the first time, Pamela didn't control the narrative. Vivian lifted her cane slightly, as if the bucket and rags from that spring visit were still right in front of her. "You wanted her to clean your house," she said to Pamela. "Because she's older, because she's a girl, and because you've decided good means useful." Pamela threw up her hands. "It's called helping. We all helped when I was raising my kids." "Did you?" Vivian asked. "Or did you just demand it from Daniel while Ashley sat and watched?" Ashley sat up. "Excuse me?" Vivian didn't back off. "I watched Mason and Carter run wild on my furniture last Christmas," she said, "and nobody called them bad. They broke my snow globe and Paul told them it was no big deal." Paul shifted, uncomfortable, but stayed quiet. Vivian looked back at Pamela. "First you tried to make Lucy scrub your baseboards to earn approval. Then you called her disrespectful when she wouldn't. Today you handed her an empty box and called her bad." She let the list sit in the air. "That is not family. That is control." My neighbor inhaled sharply, like she'd been holding her breath. Someone at the table whispered, "That's awful." Pamela's eyes darted around the room, realizing people were hearing it. The shame was spreading, and it wasn't on Lucy anymore. Pamela tried to laugh it off, the way she always did when she got cornered. "Vivian, you're being dramatic," she said. "Lucy needs to learn she can't always get what she wants." The candles on the cake had burned down to crooked wax puddles, forgotten on the table. Vivian's expression didn't change. "Lucy wanted one thing," she said. "Dignity." Ashley rolled her eyes and muttered, "She's 9. "Exactly," Vivian replied, snapping her gaze to Ashley now. "She's 9. And you two just sat here, grown women, and called her bad like it was entertainment." Lucy finally looked up, and Vivian softened just for her. "A good girl," Vivian said, "is not a girl who cleans when adults snap their fingers. A good girl is a girl who knows her own worth." Pamela's voice sharpened. "So now I'm the bad guy?" Vivian tilted her head. "You used those words first," she said. "If anyone deserves them today, it's not the child holding an empty box. It's the adults who thought it was funny." Ashley's phone slid down into her lap. She stopped recording. Daniel's jaw tightened like he'd swallowed something hard. Pamela's smile cracked, and I saw fear underneath it. Vivian wasn't scolding anymore. She was naming things. Vivian reached into the handbag she'd kept tucked beside her chair and pulled out a plain manila folder, the kind you'd see at a doctor's office, and set it on the dining table in the nook next to the half-eaten cake. A white label on the tab read "Estate" in neat block letters, like she'd filed a fact. "Since we're all so interested in lessons," she said. "Here's one." Pamela's eyes narrowed. "What is that?" "Paperwork," Vivian replied. "I met with my attorney last month. I reviewed my will, my accounts, my house. I put everything in order." Ashley let out a little laugh. "Okay, and?" Vivian tapped the folder once. "And I made sure the people who treat children like this do not benefit from my life's work." Daniel's face went pale. "Grandma." Vivian's voice stayed steady. "Most of my estate will go to you and Sarah," she said to Daniel. "And a protected trust for Lucy. She will have money for school, for a first car, for whatever she needs, without adults using it to control her." Pamela stood up so fast her chair tipped backward. "Vivian, you can't," she snapped. "I can," Vivian cut in. "And I did." Ashley's mouth opened, then shut. Paul finally looked up, eyes wide. The folder didn't look dramatic, but it hit like thunder. Pamela's voice went high. "You're punishing me because of one silly gift?" Vivian didn't even glance at the pink box. "This isn't about cardboard," she said. "It's about character." She opened the folder and slid a page forward, not for anyone to read closely, just enough to show it was real. "Pamela, you are removed as beneficiary," she said. "Ashley, you are removed as beneficiary. Paul, you'll still receive the small retirement account I planned for you, but you will not be the decision maker." Ashley's face twisted. "Are you serious?" "I'm precise," Vivian replied. "If Mason and Carter grow into decent men, I've set up a trust they can access when they're adults, protected from their parents' influence. But you two? No." The silence that followed felt heavy, like the room itself was holding Vivian's line in place. Pamela's hands shook around her purse strap. Ashley's eyes flashed, calculating. Daniel moved to stand beside me and Lucy, finally taking our side without hovering in the middle. "You need to leave," he said, voice low. Pamela scoffed. "Daniel, tell her—" "No," Daniel said, sharper now. "You came into my home and humiliated my daughter. Get out. All of you." Paul started to protest, but Daniel opened the front door and held it there, and they walked out in silence. When the door shut, the house didn't instantly feel peaceful. It felt stunned. The candles were still smoking, the pink wrapping paper was still on the rug, and Lucy was still holding that empty box like it had glued itself to her hands. I guided her to the kitchen and sat her on a stool at the counter. Daniel grabbed a damp paper towel and wiped her cheeks where a tear had finally escaped without permission. "Hey," he said, voice rough. "You're not in trouble. Not with us." Lucy stared at the box and whispered, "But if I had just cleaned, would Grandma Pamela have been nice?" That question made my stomach tighten, not because it surprised me, but because it sounded practiced, like she'd been rehearsing how to earn affection. I took the box from her and set it in the trash. Not dramatic, just done. "Lucy," I said, "love isn't a paycheck. You don't scrub floors to deserve kindness." Daniel nodded hard. "I should have stopped it sooner," he said. "I'm sorry." Lucy sniffed and looked between us. "Vivian wasn't mad at me," she said, like it mattered. "She was proud of you," I told her. "So am I." Lucy's shoulders lowered a fraction. That's how I knew the damage was real. That night, after Lucy fell asleep with frosting still under her fingernails, Daniel sat back down at the kitchen island and opened the bank app again. This time, there was no legal pad, no careful budgeting like he was negotiating with guilt. He pulled up the recurring transfer to Pamela and Paul and hovered his thumb over cancel. I didn't say a word. I just stood behind him, one hand on the back of his chair, letting him do it without me pushing. Daniel exhaled and hit the button. "Done," he said. Then he opened the payee list and deleted their name entirely, like he was wiping out a habit. Almost immediately, his phone buzzed. Pamela, then Ashley, then Pamela again, still furious about the party. It felt like they could sense the cord being cut anyway. Daniel stared at the screen, jaw working, and for a second I thought he might answer out of habit. Instead, he opened a new text thread and typed one line. "Do not contact Lucy. Do not come to our house. We will reach out when we're ready." He read it twice, then sent it before fear could talk him out of it. His phone rang again. He flipped it face down and didn't move. It was the quietest rebellion I'd ever seen. The next afternoon, I was sweeping up the last of the pink paper scraps when Daniel's phone rang again. I expected Pamela. Instead, he glanced at the caller ID and his face shifted. "It's Vivian," he said. He answered fast. "Grandma?" Vivian's voice came through thin and tight. "Daniel," she said, "I need you to come here. Now." Daniel straightened. "Are you hurt?" "No," she whispered. And the whisper is what scared me. Vivian didn't whisper. "They're here. Your mother, your father, and Ashley. They let themselves in." Daniel's eyes snapped to mine. "Grandma, are you alone with them?" "They're in my living room," Vivian said. "They brought papers. They want me to sign. I told them no, and they won't leave. In the background, I could hear a muffled voice, Pamela's, sharp and urgent, like a sales pitch with teeth. Vivian took a breath that sounded shaky. "Daniel," she said, "I'm not confused. I'm not changing my mind. But I don't like how they're looking at me." Daniel was already grabbing his keys. "We're coming," he said. "Lock your bedroom door if you can." I texted Jenna to keep Lucy for an hour, no questions, and she replied with a thumbs up. Vivian's answer was barely audible. "Hurry." Vivian lived in a quiet ranch house 10 minutes away, the kind with a bird feeder out front and tidy shutters she repainted herself every few summers. When we turned onto her street, I saw Pamela's SUV at the curb and Ashley's sedan tucked behind it, like a coordinated attack. Daniel didn't bother knocking. He tried the handle and the door opened, which made my skin prickle. "They used the spare she'd given them years ago," I muttered. Inside, voices collided in the living room. Pamela was talking fast. "It's simple, Vivian. You just sign this addendum, and everything goes back to normal. You were upset yesterday?" "I was not upset," Vivian snapped, and hearing her snap was almost a relief. Ashley jumped in. "You're being manipulated. Sarah's always wanted your money." I stepped into the doorway with Daniel beside me. "Stop," I said. Not loud, just clear. Pamela spun like she'd been waiting. "Oh, perfect," she said. "Here come the con artists." Vivian sat upright in her armchair, face flushed, one hand gripping her cane. Papers were spread across her coffee table, and Paul stood behind Pamela, blocking the hallway like he was security. Daniel moved between them and Vivian. "Nobody is signing anything," he said. "You're leaving." Pamela smiled without warmth. "Make us." And that's when I understood this wasn't about feelings. It was about access. Pamela angled her body toward Vivian like she could cut me out of the room. "Tell him," she said, voice syrupy again. "Tell Daniel you're just stressed and you need us to handle things." Vivian's eyes flashed. "I handled a household in the 70s, she said. "Don't talk to me like I'm a toddler." Paul finally spoke, low and threatening. "Viv, you're 84. People make mistakes. Let's not let strangers in suits convince you to wreck your family." "Strangers in suits?" I repeated. "You mean an attorney doing his job?" Ashley jabbed a finger at me. "You're stealing from an old woman." Vivian slapped her palm on the armrest. "I am giving my money where I choose," she said. "And right now, I choose for you to get out of my house." Pamela crossed her arms. "We're not leaving until you sign," she said, and her voice rose. "You owe me. I raised your grandson. I sacrificed—" Vivian's breathing went tight. Her hand trembled on the cane. Daniel glanced at me, then at his phone, like he was counting options. Vivian looked at him and said very calmly, "Call the police." Pamela laughed, loud and ugly. "You wouldn't." Daniel hit call anyway, and nobody backed down. The police arrived in 2 cruisers, quiet and professional, and the officer who stepped inside didn't look impressed by Pamela's pearl earrings or Ashley's outraged face. He asked Vivian, "Ma'am, do you want them to leave?" "Yes," Vivian said, voice steady again. "They are not welcome here." Pamela launched into her speech. "This is a family matter. She's confused." The officer cut her off with a raised hand. "Ma'am, you need to step outside." When Pamela tried to argue, he repeated it, firmer, and Paul's shoulders slumped like he knew the game was over. Ashley hissed at me as she passed. "This isn't over," like she was in a movie. Daniel didn't respond. He stood by Vivian's chair, one hand on her shoulder, and watched them be escorted out onto the porch. Once the door shut, Vivian let out a breath that sounded like relief and rage mixed together. "Good," she said. "Now we finish." We did. The next week, Vivian changed her locks and removed the spare keys from family hiding spots. Her attorney completed the final paperwork for Lucy's trust, and Vivian signed formal paperwork barring Pamela, Paul, and Ashley from her property. Daniel documented everything, stopped every payment, and blocked their numbers. Pamela lost the house she assumed she'd inherit, and she lost her way into our lives. 6 months later, our home felt steady again. A year later, Lucy turned 10 with a small sleepover and cupcakes from a grocery store bakery, and nobody in our house flinched when the doorbell rang. Daniel didn't check his phone every time it buzzed. I didn't rehearse speeches in my head before family gatherings, because we stopped going to the ones that required armor. Vivian comes over on Wednesdays now. She sits at our kitchen table with a mug of tea and helps Lucy with spelling words, patient and dry-humored. Sometimes she tells stories about Daniel as a kid, real stories, not the kind that make someone small. Lucy listens, relaxed, not trying to earn laughter. Pamela and Ashley tried a few things at first. Guilt texts from new numbers, a card sent to our old address, a message through a cousin. Each time, Daniel handled it the same way. One sentence, no emotion, no debate. Do not contact us. Then he moved on with his day. The strangest part was how fast the noise faded when we stopped feeding it. Our home got quieter, and in that quiet, Lucy got lighter. The pink box is long gone, but the lesson stayed, just not the one Pamela wanted. Love doesn't come with chores attached. If someone handed your child an empty box, what would you do? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more.